Welcome to the Devin Nunes Podcast, breaking through the political noise, separating fact from fiction. From the San Joaquin Valley, the breadbasket of the solar system, here is your host, Devin Nunes.
Welcome back to the Devin Nunes Podcast. This is part 2 with Byron York with his new book, Obsession. Byron is with Fox News contributor with the Washington Examiner. Byron, great investigative journalist. I saw you walking the halls. I met with you during that time period, during the impeachment hoax. I'll say this, that you guys essentially from the very beginning, you detected that there were severe problems with the whistleblower. I'm assuming you get into it in the book with the whistleblower. And the irony is we're still having problems with whistleblowers. This is the new fad in Washington, that if you want to be a whistleblower, who do you go to? None other than the Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee. That's where all whistleblowers go. Most likely if I had advice for whistleblowers, I'd probably stay away from the House Intelligence Committee. But with that said, Byron, why don't we start with the impeachment hoax and start with the whistleblower?
Well, one thing that was very striking is the Mueller report is released in April of 2019. And it's a huge disappointment to Democrats because Mueller does concede that he was not able to establish that conspiracy or coordination, what we call collusion, had occurred between the Trump campaign and Russia during the 2016 campaign. Mm-hmm. So a lot of Republicans thought, well, that's it. It's over, because that's the main question, right? And he couldn't find it. Right. Democrats did not believe that. They believed that they certainly had taken a hit, but they wanted to continue their effort aimed at impeaching the president over Russia. So they think, well, we need hearings. We need some hearings. We need kind of a Watergate-style dramatic moment. Let's have Robert Mueller come, and he will come and he'll stand in the House and he will deliver this damning indictment of President Trump. Not a real indictment, a metaphorical indictment. And it'll be a Watergate show, and then everybody, the whole world will support impeaching President Trump. And it turned into a disaster. And I write quite a bit about how the Trump defense team was not totally surprised when that happened. There were clues, some very serious clues throughout the investigation, that Mueller was experiencing a sort of cognitive decline and was having trouble and was not the super sharp man that he had been 10, 15 years ago. So anyway, this hearing is a disaster. And I think a lot of Republicans breathed a sigh of relief. And they said, oh, boy, thank goodness this 2-year ordeal is finally over. Some of the Trump defenders took a vacation. It was time to chill out a bit. But Democrats didn't view it that way. And there were two things going on. First of all, they didn't give up on the idea of impeaching Trump over Russia. If you look at your colleague Al Green, the Democrat from Texas, has been the most zealous advocate of impeachment in the House. And he has forced votes periodically on impeachment. And he forced one about a week before the hearing, and 95 Democrats voted for impeachment before the Mueller hearing. And then after the Mueller hearing, the Washington Post did a survey, and 114 Democrats were for impeachment. So that number was growing, and the Mueller testimony, which Republicans thought was a disaster that would put an end to this whole thing, that didn't stop it. But what was bigger was going on, and what you did not know at the time, was that Adam Schiff was working on a new thing, a whistleblower complaint. And there's a meeting in September, early September, of the House Intelligence Committee. And Schiff says there's something about a whistleblower. And Chris Stewart wrote, he said, I don't want to say Schiff was giddy, but he was so anticipating that we thought something was up. And so you guys, and I'm talking to someone who was in the room, you guys didn't know what Schiff had going about the whistleblower, and some of you thought that it was just going to be more Russia. They were just going to go back to the well again because that's what they had always done.
Right.
And it was a little while later that you learned that it was about Ukraine and this phone call and all of that. But what was interesting was there was this moment when it appeared that the Trump-Russia matter had finally, petered out, and that there might be a moment of peace, and then bang, you were back to the races again.
Yeah, and that's I agree. I mean, I remember that. My Mueller went up in flames. Now, look, I knew they were going to continue with impeachment because, remember, they were going to have to bring the Mueller report to life or whatever nonsense.
Well, that's what the hearing was supposed to do.
Yeah, and that clearly didn't happen. So then of course, you start what we called what the president has called the dungeon, the star chamber. There was a lot of terms for it. But what's your kind of your recollection? I mean, there were a lot of members going in and out down there. We were always supposed to hear from the whistleblower. We have yet to hear from this whistleblower, though. I don't know if Adam Schiff, he's into new whistleblowers, but I guess we're going to hear from these new ones. I'd like to hear from the old one first.
Yeah, and I write a lot about Lieutenant Colonel Vindman here, who is not the whistleblower, but a lot of Republicans came to believe that he was really he started this whole investigation. And basically what happens is Lieutenant Colonel Vindman's on the White House National Security Council staff. He listens to the call, and the Trump-Zelensky call, and there are a bunch of people listening to it, and he is the only one who thinks there's something wrong, that something wrong has happened. And he's asked, first in the secret depositions and then later in public, he's asked, well, what did you think was wrong? Did you think the president had committed a crime of some sort or what? And he said he really didn't know, but he thought something was wrong, and he thought it would damage the bipartisan support that Ukraine has on Capitol Hill. And so then the question became, well, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, who outside the NSC and the White House, who did you tell about this? And he said, well, I told two people. And he said, okay, who were they? Well, the first one was George Kent. And George Kent was a State Department official who dealt with Ukraine. He actually testified in the impeachment proceedings. Okay, who was the second one? Well, he was in the intelligence community, and that's when Adam Schiff and the Democrats moved to cut off Vindman. You cannot say who the other person you talked to was. You can never, ever, under any circumstances, reveal who that second person you talked to was. And Republicans are saying, well, whoa, what's going on here? Why can't he tell us who's going on? And Schiff said, because it would identify the whistleblower. So Republicans thought, well, this does not take a rocket scientist to figure out that the second person that Vindman told about the call was, in fact, the whistleblower. So Vindman really is the source of this investigation.
Right. He's essentially, he used an avatar who had a long series of hatred towards Trump, at least the rumored whistleblower. And so, yeah, you're exactly right. The real whistleblower is Vindman. And look, and the larger question with all this, because we never got to interview the whistleblower and we never got to see all the emails, is what was the real story here? Did somebody actually just concoct this? Because it sure seemed planned. And then I remember that funny. It was really kind of ticks you off actually, but that Schiff always claimed he didn't know who the whistleblower was.
Yes.
So if Vindman told us who he told, how would Schiff know? Because Schiff didn't know the whistleblower. So none of this ever made any sense. It's why it was such a joke and such a hoax. Byron, what?
One more thing about this that's really important, because in Congressman Ratcliffe's questioning of Vindman, Ratcliffe was on the Intelligence Committee, now the Director of National Intelligence. He went through why it was that Vindman had an objection to the call, and Vindman was worried about U.S.-Ukraine policy. It was very important to him. I mean, he was born there, and he came to the United States as an infant, and has served in the U.S. military. But Ratcliffe finally said, it just sounds like all of your reasons are a policy difference. You have a policy difference with the president, and you think the president has deviated from the interagency consensus. That was a word he used a lot. But this is a policy difference. this is a judgment call. This is a difference of opinion. It is not a reason to remove a president from office.
So Byron, to get congratulations on your book, and we'll have it up on the screen. But just in closing out here, we've had a lot of folks that have followed this closely, because there's very few investigative journalists who have done the work that you've done to get to the bottom of the Russia hoax and the Ukraine hoax, impeachment, and all of that. What advice do you have? Because it had to be tough, I'm sure, standing there, even with your editors, the people you work with, even at Fox News, because you stood tall, you stood there strong, you tried you really fought to get the facts. What advice do you have for those journalists that are out there now who are maybe working at one of these, what I would call a fake news outlet, that are struggling to really figure out their way ahead? What advice do you give to? I mean, you're a veteran, you've been around a long time. It couldn't have been easy, I'm sure, for you.
Well, first of all, I would have to thank the Washington Examiner for giving me total freedom and support to do this reporting. And the same thing for Fox News for giving me the freedom to discuss it on television and the opportunity to discuss it on television. So that's all great. As far as reporters are concerned, I think that it's pretty easy to see when there's groupthink at work in news coverage, when the most important thing in the world is the Woodward book. And then last week, the most important thing in the world was the Atlantic article. And the week before that, the most important thing in the world was the post office, and so
yeah. Oh my God, I forgot about that already.
I think it's easy to see when there's groupthink going, and just try to question the groupthink, deviate from the groupthink a little bit, and that's the only advice I would give.
Did you ever think? Was there ever a time when you were talking to me or the folks on my committee or others? Was there ever a time that you ever thought, gosh, maybe Trump is an actual Russian agent of some kind?
No, actually, I never thought that collusion actually occurred. I will say I was careful in my public statements about it, because I did not think it occurred. I thought the case was very strong that it did not. On the other hand, before the Mueller report, there had really been no adjudication of it, so I tried to be careful. But if you remember, during the Mueller investigation, he started indicting people. He indicted Michael Flynn. He indicted Paul Manafort. He indicted Rick Gates. He indicted George Papadopoulos. He did not indict Carter Page.
Right.
And several other people. And none of them were charged with taking part in any collusion, any conspiracy or coordination with Russia. None of them. They were mostly charged with either process crimes, that is lying to investigators, or financial crimes that had nothing to do with the Trump-Russia affair. Manafort, Gates, Michael Cohen, these are all people who were evading taxes, mostly. So I really felt that as the investigation went on, it became pretty clear that if Mueller could have, in his document, in his charges, if he could have documented a collusion or conspiracy, then he would have done it.
And it was, that was kind of a shock and awe effect that then, of course, as you say, the groupthink in the mainstream media, they just, I don't know how many times I had to say, I would go out there and say, look, we don't have any evidence of this. We haven't seen anything. And they'd say, but there's been 5 indictments, or whatever the hell it was. There's been 5 indictments. And we'd have to say, and it's tough you always have to beat down these ridiculous straw man arguments. And we'd say, yeah, guys, but Manafort had been investigated years ago. It has nothing to do with Trump. And if anything, it's showing that if these were really the kind of the main characters. And then I knew once you got to Roger Stone and Jerome Corsi, that's where they were by the end.
It's kind of the bottom of the barrel, yeah.
It was really just the bottom of the barrel, and it's sad what they did to those guys. But you actually, just kind of the final subject, final question here, and kind of in your past and how you got to know this. One of the things I found, as you were doing your investigative work, you would bring up examples of earlier investigative research you had done back in the day, because you were involved writing and reporting on the Clinton impeachment.
Yeah.
And so how did that aid in your ability, that experience, what did you gain from there to know what to look for in the Mueller special prosecution?
Two events that I'd covered in the past were really useful. One was the Clinton impeachment and the Clinton scandals that preceded it. And the second was the CIA leak affair, the whole Valerie Plame affair that few remember, but actually consumed the George W. Bush White House for a while.
Yes.
On the Clinton impeachment, I definitely saw that Republicans had gotten very agitated back then in 1998 and 99, and they did it because they could, and it didn't really work out for them. They didn't suffer terribly. I mean, they kept control of the House for several terms afterwards. But it just did not work the way they had hoped it would. And, it was pretty obvious that the Democratic impeachment of Trump was going to be no more successful. The thing about the Valerie Plame affair, remember they were going to investigate the leak of Valerie Plame's identity. She was an undercover CIA agent, and they appointed a special counsel. And he knew. By the way, the special counsel was appointed by James Comey.
Yeah.
It's Patrick Fitzgerald. So he knew from day one who the leaker was. And yet he continued to investigate for 3 years, ended up indicting one person and convicting one person, Scooter Libby, who was the Vice President Cheney's chief of staff, for lying to investigators. And other than that, had nothing. He knew who leaked on day one, and the investigation just went on. And it really showed you how special counsel investigations can just go on and on. They can take different turns. They can expand. There can be mission creep. The same thing happened with the Starr investigation with Clinton. And it made me very skeptical. And I remember being on Special Report on Fox the very day that Mueller was appointed, May 17th, 2017. And so we had to come up with some reaction very quickly. And I said, these investigations tend to go on a very long time. They expand. There's mission creep. They go in unexpected directions, and who knows how this is going to work out.
You may just end up with Roger Stone and Jerome Corsi at the end of it.
Can't tell.
Well, Byron, thank you so much. Byron's at Parler, at Byron York. He's on Parler. Also, Byron, you have your morning. You call it the morning memo.
The Daily Memo, the Byron
Daily Memo.
Daily Memo. Please subscribe to it. You'll get it in your mailbox about 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 5:30 a.m. where you are every day, and it's not too long, and it's usually about one subject. It's not those newsletters that are supposed to be digests of all the news. It's not that. It's something that's really interesting that you should know about.
You can follow Byron York at the Washington Examiner and at Parler. Byron, thank you so much. Congratulations on your book. I'm going to get to reading it right now.
All right.
All right.
Thanks again.
Absolutely. This is Devin Nunes. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Devin Nunes Podcast. We invite you to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And remember, you can download this podcast on iTunes or at devinnunes.com.
Storm clouds been gathering so long, I don't know.
The darkness around us leaves no easy road.
We started wondering if every road dead ends our dreams. Wind whips the dust up and rain's pouring down.
Good people struggling in every hometown.
We've started wondering if we even matter at all. We'll take that hard road to happier days, 'cause we kept our American faith. Now it's not our first trial by fire like this.
It's nothing hard working family can fix.
We've got the power to save it all here in our hands. We'll take that hard road to happier days, 'cause we kept our American faith. As we, the people, free and strong, fight through the dark night. but we're not afraid.
That's why they call her the home of the brave.
With a prayer and a purpose, we're already half the way there. We'll take that hard road to happier days, 'cause we kept our American faith. Ooh, we kept our American. We kept our American. Ooh, we kept our American. We kept our American faith. Freedom marches on.
Paid for by Devin Nunes Campaign Committee.